So my name's Zachary Belford. That's my entire name. I work, as you said, with ETC Labs. I work on a number of projects, specifically OpenRPC, and that's the one that we're going to talk about today in this workshop. There's a talk that was given earlier by our teammate there, Shane Jonas. And so if you haven't seen that, very briefly, OpenRPC is a complement to JSON RPC. So JSON RPC is a remote procedure call specification where all the messages are sent and received over JSON. And another really interesting part of it is that the transport is completely agnostic to the actual spec. So what does that mean? It means that I can send these JSON objects however I choose and receive them however, and that's perfectly valid according to the spec. Like it could be over HTTP, it could be over a WebSocket, it could be as a letter in the mail that I send to your home address or whatever. Like that's completely valid. So yeah, OpenRPC is a way of describing a JSON RPC service in a machine and human readable way. And so as for this workshop, what we're going to do is highlight how you can use OpenRPC and a concept called document-driven development and build a really simple web service. So to get started, we'll talk first about what it is that we're going to build. So for the purpose of the demo, I think it's best to keep it as simple as possible, just to minimize the mistakes that I might make, but B, just to get the points across. So I personally really like the concept of simple math as it's basically, I think, like a calculator, right? We have like basically simple math functions like addition and subtraction, where you give them numbers, you get back numbers. And so following in line with this idea of like, okay, we want to start with the documentation and then we want to get into the code so that we can really understand the problem, is to summarize the goal here. So we're going to come over to this the OpenRPC Playground, and we just get this basic example here, but we're just gonna write in our own stuff. So I'll delete all this for now. Okay, don't need that either. Don't need any of that stuff. All right, so we're specifying what version of the spec it is, and I think the latest is 1.2.4. You can check that by just going to the spec, and yeah, it's written right there. Like it's auto updated every time it gets released, so you can trust it. And so yeah, so this is the general anatomy of a OpenRPC document. We have some things like the title of the API. So let's call it simple math. And we'll say it's version 1, sure. And then we describe the methods. So how do we describe the methods? Well, first of all, it's nice that we have this autocomplete or document validation built right into Playground. So it can kind of just guide us along to tell us what we're missing. But we can also hit Control Space, and that'll pull up a drop down of things that we might need. So in this case, we need a name, and we'll call it addition. Let's do lowercase. And then the method needs some parameters. So let's do params. Okay, how do we define parameters? So both parameters and results can be defined by what's called a content descriptor. And the content descriptor has inside of it a name. So let's call our first parameter A. And what else does it need? It needs a schema. And this is a JSON schema. So yeah, you can look up. It's a very well structured spec. Yeah, so it's a way to describe a JSON object using JSON. And so we get some autocompletes for that as well. But here we already know it's really simply just going to be a integer. And then let's say it takes A and B. Okay. And then we got to say what it returns. Oops. So the result is also a content descriptor, and we'll call it, oops. Let's see. Fix some formatting here. There we go. Yeah, and yeah, so it's kind of cool. We got the docs updating on the right hand side there every time we make some changes. Oh, uh-oh. That's no good. See if it's still okay. Thank goodness for the local storage. Yeah, so it does auto save whatever you're writing into local storage. So that's a nice little save in case you find yourself in a weird issue like that. Again, this is all, very real and very living. So if you do find any issues, please feel free to open an issue. In fact, the playground is at GitHub. OpenRPC/playground. Oops. Yeah, I can just pop over here, open an issue, but I'll do that later, of course. Yeah, so coming on through, we can see what types we have here. And that's the basics of just our first method. So since we said we wanted to be, more documentation driven about it, well, we can add some stuff like descriptions, takes two numbers and adds them. Cool. And we can give it, there's also like summary, stuff like that. Yeah. And further, if you want to make the schemas more detailed, you can give these titles, and I can just call it an integer. And then actually you can see, oh, there's some repetition there, right? So I want this over down here too. So there's actually also this here called components. And this is borrowed, a lot of this actually is borrowed from OpenAPI. In fact, OpenRPC is a fork of OpenAPI. And so we can define any reusable things down here. So for example, if we want to define some schemas, we can say, okay, I want an integer, and then I can just paste that in there. And then instead of putting that there, now I can do $ref. And then to refer to it, this is borrowed from JSON schemas ref concept. Yeah, and you can put these in place of content descriptors. So anytime you have anytime you have a component you want to reuse, you can use this ref thing like this. And then I can put that down here too. But for now, we'll just leave it as simple because we're probably going to change stuff later. Yeah, so we've defined the service. Now we want to actually build a service. So for that, we we have a bunch of tools actually around the OpenRPC documents. One of them is the generator. So it's called OpenRPC Generator. And you can download this on NPM. And it's just a command line tool that lets you run the generator through some number of components. Right now, the component types are fairly limited. You can generate clients in TypeScript, Rust. Yeah, I think just TypeScript and Rust. And then you can generate servers in TypeScript. And yeah, working on more components all the time. So should be more coming soon. But yeah, so I've installed it. I also created a new directory, popped in there. It's empty right now, as you can see. And so after having, I have to, yeah, when you install things globally, if I use node-env, I've got to rehash, yeah, whatever. So there's now the OpenRPC Generator tool. Yeah. So it gives us this init method, and that just, so rolling back, generally how the tool works is you would write into a config file what components you want to generate and what parameters you want to pass to each of those components. This init function just creates you that initial config, similar to how npm init creates you a package JSON to get you started. This one creates you a OpenRPC generator config. So where is our document? Okay, so actually let's rewind because we're going to need to make a new file. And then I will come over here, demo. Yeah, so, all right, I want to paste this into here now. There you go. Okay. And then now when I run npm init, I have, oh, not npm init, OpenRPC init. Yeah, so now like I've put it in the default location, which is OpenRPC, but you can actually put a URL in here as well. So like there's all these examples, simple math being one of them, is like a more terse version of it. And if you just go to the raw and you paste this in, that works as well. But we're just going to use the default for now. Generate artifacts, go to /, yes, let's just generate everything. Generate a server, yeah. TS client, we'll call the Rust one RS client, and then the server, we'll call it server. Okay, so it's generated us this config file now. So right here, right, if I, so we have in there, and then it also gives us this command that we can run, and that'll actually run the generator. And so the purpose here is that you may want to rerun the generator multiple times after the first time, but I'll show you that in a little bit here. So, okay, we run it, it's generated stuff. Now we have a server folder, so I can hop into there. And now we haven't written any code, right? So you might be wondering, well, what does it generate, right? Okay, well, it generates you everything that you would want except for the actual implementation of the code, right? Because we know what the interface is supposed to be. It's supposed to have, you know, a function that takes an integer and another integer and resolves the result, which is C. So what the generator can do for you is set up a project so that all you have to do is really just implement this method, right? See, it generates us a file called in the methods folder, called addition, and it's basically an empty husk, right? But you can see it's actually typed. And it's typed from the, it's typed. Part of what the generator does is it generates the typings for you as well. So if I show you what those look like, generated typings. Yeah, so we have our function that has like A and B, takes integers, and it returns this other integer. And I guess, see, that's an interesting example. It didn't give us the integer, like, it didn't give us this title here. And the answer to why is because if you look at the result, the schema doesn't have a title, right? So in any case where you don't have a title on your schemas, it'll generate you a title for your schema. Yeah, so if we wanted to make that just say integer, we'd go back over here and write in title. Right? Or we'd, use the ref thing like I was doing earlier. Yeah, or I guess since it's actually over in here now, we should do it. Yeah. And now I should actually just be able to, although I did try this today and it wasn't really working all that well, but we'll see. That in here now. So methods. It's the same, right? Yeah. See, fixed it. Okay. So now all we have to do really to implement this is just go into the addition method and return the result. So return. Oh, it still needs to be a promise. So there you go. That's that. Yeah, so now I should be able to npm install beep boop beep. Yeah, so the beauty here is like we have a typed interface and we have a server that's all scaffolded up for us. And the scaffolding gives us validation on the input parameters, but it also gives us this API available over HTTP and WebSockets. And you can add more transports if you'd like. You can just go look at our implementation. Like we have this OpenRPC server JS. That's just a JSON RPC service or server framework, I guess. Like you could say it's that. Yeah, it just takes an OpenRPC document and gives you the validation stuff. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. But anyway, so the npm install is done. So I can npm start it. TypeScript compiling, which is actually nice. Okay, so it is now started. And so if we go back to Playground, actually we'll go to Inspector. So there's this other tool. Playground actually uses it. If you click this Try It Now button, it's in there. But it's also a standalone tool over here. And since I know that it's running a JSON RPC service locally on 4441, I can go in here and pop that in there. There you go. And look, it says OpenRPC document detected. And so this is like one of the sweetest parts I think about OpenRPC is there's this method called rpc.discover that part of the JSON or part of the OpenRPC spec says you should add, and that method returns to you the OpenRPC document. So here in Inspector, just by knowing the URL where the service is, this inspector can load in the OpenRPC document and right away give us full autocomplete on the service that we literally just made. So like, yeah, let's try it out. Let's give it 2 + 2. And we get 4, 8, and 10. Cool. And yeah, so just to show that, no gaffery here, we can do like, say, why don't we just call it, actually, even better, let's actually add another method. So this one. So we'll take our addition method. We'll call it subtraction. Redundancy. Yeah. I'll just still leave it as unrefed for now. Yeah. So we have the husk of our new method. And I can just easy mode regenerate. Bam. And then I go back into server, TypeScript. And I run npm start. Oh, wait. I have to actually implement it, right? So source methods. Hey, look, we got a new method, subtraction. What do I do? A minus B. Okay, 1 minus B, A minus B. And then I start it. I just have this shorthand. That's npm start. Boop, boop, boop. Give it a second. Okie dokie. Come back in here, give that a refresh. Oops. And subtraction. Bam. Bam. So it works. But then you ask, what about if I give this not a string? Haha. We get errors, structured errors. This is super, super helpful for any developer who wants to present user errors in a standardized way, right? Yeah, so I think that more or less sums up the demo that I wanted to show. There's certainly a lot more to show, but I think this sort of gives a good introduction to what some of the generator server tool can do, or this, I should say, the generator server component. But then also just some of the tools that you can build with having an OpenRPC document. And it's highly encouraged that you guys should experiment and try some others. In fact, what I've shown you is coming at it from an approach of you don't have an OpenRPC document or a service yet, and you're starting all of this from scratch. But certainly you might already have a service that provides some JSON RPC or some other interface, and you want to add OpenRPC or JSON RPC. And that's sort of what Isaac is going to help out with, because he's solve that rather nicely. So yeah, thanks for your time, and I'll pass it to Isaac.